Self-control. We've got it, right? You know, we started a while back doing the fruit of the Spirit, looking at this whole picture. And fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And since I've almost thought about skipping this because self-control is something that's just so normal and we've all got that figured out that I thought we might skip it. But since it's in there, I thought we'd cover it. We'd talk about it. And self-control. And not to do it on purpose right after Thanksgiving. I was sick for a couple weeks and I missed a couple weeks. We were supposed to be done before Thanksgiving, and I don't really need to stir up guilt for how you had self-control with the Thanksgiving dinners, however many you had and whatever desserts you had. Self-control, right? That's something that was, you guys really, well, maybe you didn't. Maybe self-control is something we need to talk about because how we get one more bite, one more meal, one more thing is kind of how things happen in our life, self-control. And self-control is something we have to learn because we start off in our life early on with emotions. We are born with a body that is a bundle of emotions. And we don't, we start off flailing kind of about and we are just whatever emotions strike us, that's what everybody knows we have. It could be happy, it could be angry, it could be defiant, emotions. And as we grow, we learn, hopefully, some sort of self-control, and we do. We learn some sort of self-control, some way of presenting ourselves, even though we have all of this emotion stuff going inside of us. And so we have this emotional self-control that we need, but there's also physical self-control that we need, because there's this thing called eating that we start off. Hopefully that's nobody's Thanksgiving picture. I don't know how y'all did. But there's self-control. How do you get that food in your mouth and eat it or wear it, that sort of thing? Self-control is just a part of the growing process. So when we talk about self-control, it shouldn't be something that scares us. It's something that we always have to deal with, whether it's eating or learning to ride a bike. There's just a method. There's a process of gaining control of what you want to do. So when we read that list, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, seeing self-control on there, a lot of time we go, I don't know how to control myself, but you do. In many areas of your life, you have some control. Because not many of you in here had that spaghetti face or baby food face. I'm assuming, I wasn't at all y'all's Thanksgiving dinners, but I'm assuming that many of you managed to get the food in your mouth mostly because you have some sort of self-control. So the whole idea of self-control should not be that scary to us. But there are areas maybe of self-control that you've been less successful at in your life. When we talk about self-control, there's one thing, think about the developmental self-control of emotions, of eating, of learning to ride a bike or things like that. There are things that we have been successful at. But then there are other areas maybe that we have not been as successful. And I want to talk about some of that. Maybe what you've said this week. Maybe you managed to eat the turkey and the pie just fine, but the things that came out of your mouth, maybe you go, oh, whoops. Or what about some of the things that you did this week, the things that we do? We need to talk about self-control in those, and especially we need to talk about self-control in the things that we think. So we know that self-control is a normal part of growing up. And we have developed self-control in so many areas of our life. So we need to not be scared of self-control. is something we have already in many aspects of life. So we need to talk about developing self-control in some other areas maybe that you haven't done as well, and talk about maybe why do we struggle. And let's start with that. Let's start with why. Why do we want self-control? You know, as a baby, you want self-control because you actually want that food to make it into your mouth, because that's really your goal. So there's a reason behind self-control. And if we don't know why, we lack the motivation to actually try to have the self-control. Why do we need self-control? Why do we want to have self-control over the things that we say? Why do we want to have self-control over the things that we do? Why do we want to have self-control over the things that we think? Now, in church and spiritually, a lot of times it's man, I don't want to go to hell. And I'm with you. I don't either. But a lot of times that fear of I better not say that because I don't want to be judged. And so there's this whole realm of my motivation for doing the right things, for saying the right things, and having a pure mind has to do with avoiding punishment, which that is one of the things. God has wrath. There is a hell, and there is judgment, and people will be put in hell because of failure. But that's not the whole picture of why self-control. I'd like for you to consider a couple of scenarios of self-control. Do people learn to drive just so that they don't wreck the car? Or do people learn to drive so they can go places? Is that what we hear teenagers say? Man, I want to learn to drive because I don't want to wreck. Or is it, I want to learn to drive so I can go. And I can go with my friends, and I can take my friends places. See, there's more to learning the controlling a car than just trying to not wrecking is an important part of it. You who are learning to drive, that's true. It's important to learn not to wreck the car. But the whole goal of learning to drive isn't just so I don't wreck the car. It's because I can go places. Or what about another scenario, especially coming off this past week? Do people learn to cook just so they don't die of food poisoning? Maybe. Or is there some sort of joy in sharing food, fixing food that's enjoyable to eat? Now, self-control in knowing how to put it in, yes, it's important to learn how to not die when you cook. But our whole motivation of cooking isn't just so we don't die. We love it when we get together and different people bring that dish that you're good at, that dessert or the beans or the meat, whatever it is. You did a good job. I heard some people bragging this morning on the food that you got to eat because somebody had the control to know how long to cook it and what to put in it and how to mix it up and when to take it off and all that. And it was good. And the whole goal of learning how to cook was so that you can share this food with somebody. Not just to not die of food poisoning. And when God gives us His Spirit and the love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, it's not just so we don't burn in hell. It's because He is presenting us to the world as He is sharing Himself through us with the world. And so learning self-control isn't just about avoiding hell, but it's being a gift from God to people who are hungry. And when we think of that mission, it makes the motive for self-control more desirable and something we really want to pursue. And that's really what we see when we read the scriptures. If we look in 2 Peter chapter 1, it says, for this reason, make every effort. And the reason is, you've been blessed with every spirit. He's given us everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge who called us. We can escape the corruption of the world and participate in the divine nature. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, virtue with knowledge, knowledge with self-control. Self-control with steadfastness, steadfastness with godliness, godliness with brotherly kindness, brotherly affection with love. If these qualities are yours and are increasing, They will keep you from being ineffective or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. There's something more than just avoiding hell here. It's growing in self-control in my words and in my deeds and in my thoughts so that I will be fruitful. I will be effective as far as it is serving Christ. I have something to share because I am someone who is being shared by God. Why? Because it matters to other people. When I present not just the food I cooked, but the joy that the Spirit has put in me. It matters that I not only share that I can drive people around safely, but I have control over my life so I can be trustworthy. There's more to it than avoiding hell. And this is an important part of this picture. Now, going back to Paul's teaching in Galatians, where the fruit of the Spirit is listed compared with the works of the flesh, before he talks about the fruit of the Spirit, he said, you were called to freedom, brothers. Only don't use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love, serve one another. Self-control, what kind of service are you giving in your deeds and in your words? For the whole law is filled up in one word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. All this picture of the fruit of the Spirit is how we are. It's our character, the way we live, the way we talk, the way we act. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out. You're not consumed by one another. A joyful occasion becomes a frustrating occasion when we start competing and making fun of or tearing each other down, when we compare ourselves to each other instead of just enjoying each other's company. Self-control in what we do and what we say. Why? So that when we are together with other people, we can just enjoy it. We're not there to feel guilty or to condemn or make other people feel bad about they're not as good as I am, or I feel bad because I'm not as good as you are. Let's just enjoy each other's company. Let's control our words and our deeds and our thoughts to love each other. That's what Paul wrote before he talked about the fruit of the Spirit. So we set the tone. Why? Because we are presented by God. And then after he talks about the fruit of the Spirit in chapter 6 of Galatians, he says, brothers, if anyone's caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual, restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted, and bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Again, we are here to be presentable, to bless lives with the blessing God has made us to be. We are the blessing. We are the service of God to others. And why do we need to learn self-control? So we don't hurt people when God has put us there to protect them. When you call, you're hurt, you call for an ambulance and you come, you don't want somebody that's not got self-control. You don't want somebody stumbling around and dropping you. Well, here we are on the gurney. Oh, there's a bump. Whoops. Hey, would you help me put this person back on the gurney because we got to get him to the ambulance? And I'll just grab him by a foot and you grab him by the hair. We want a little bit more control than that. Or if you've been to the doctor and they're trying to draw blood, you want somebody with control. They're not stabbing. Maybe you've experienced that. You want some more control. Can we have somebody else who's got some more self-control that's going to give me an IV? We like to have people with self-control serving us. God intends for us to be people with self-control when he uses us to serve others, to restore people who are caught up in sin. Self-control in how we do it. Why we do it, we want them saved. How we do it, we want to say things that are helpful for building them up and not just tearing them down. We want to control the words and the things that we do so that we can restore people. We can serve people. We're not just here to avoid hell. We're here to represent God on earth so people can be restored. And in the meantime, the self-control to not get so caught up that we ourselves fall away into the anger, into the bitterness, into the despair, into the temptation to sin that we've escaped. Self-control. So that's why we need self-control. But now, so we know why. Okay, good. how are we going to do this? How are we going to grow in the self-control in the areas? Like I've said before, we've all learned some sort of self-control. We've learned to read, we've learned to write, some have learned to drive, some have learned to cook. We have learned skills and have control over our what we say and what we do and what we think in certain areas. So we can do it, we have done it, but let's talk about how do we do this spiritually? Well, let's look back at that 2 Peter verse. At the beginning, in verse 5, he says, "For this reason, make every effort." Let it be something you actually focus on. If we don't pay attention to something, we will not learn to do it. If we don't study before the test, you're not ready for the test. It's like, I've got a test, okay, and I have the book that tells me what to study for the test, but if I don't open the book and actually learn it, I'm not ready for the test. I didn't do it. See, this make every effort idea means I'm going to start thinking about all these love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These are things we have to decide I want to get better at. Because God has given us His Spirit to equip us. But if we don't use it and learn it, we're not going to get better. Well, and even in 2 Peter, He's given us everything we need for life and godliness so we can escape the corruption of the world caused by evil desires and participate in the divine nature. God has said, it's all there. You've got to want to do it, though. Whether it's learning a musical instrument, you've got to do it. You know, I teach percussion lessons at the university here, and some of my students practice, and they get better. Other students don't practice, and they don't get better. And I understand, especially if you're not a music major, that you have these lessons, they're fun in the beginning, but when you have other exams and papers due, it's hard to keep coming in to practice. I understand that. However, it doesn't make you accomplish what you set out to accomplish if you don't think, I've got to do the time to do this. The same is true with spiritual growth. We've got to decide that it really is important for me to have self-control. It really is important for the words that come out of my mouth to be godly, spiritually uplifting words. We have to decide that it's important that whatever I'm going to do is going to be a blessing for somebody and not just selfish actions. When he says make every effort, he's saying, have you decided you're really going to do this? You're really going to learn this? Do you really have a desire to be the child of God, showing the heart of God, sharing the words of God, offering the love of God to the people around you? When you decide that, God says, I've given you what you need, but you got to make a decision that's what you want to do. And that is a place where many of us fail to grow in self-control. We haven't made it a priority. And we need to change that. We need to decide that we're going to make it a priority to grow in spiritual ways. And to do that, let's reorder these words. How do you think about yourself in this world? We spend a lot of time having a hard time with self-control because we don't believe, I don't think I can do it. I failed with my words. That's just how I am. I'm not important. Nobody cares what I think anyway. And there's a whole list of things in our thought process. But let me tell you, Jesus died for you because he loves you. God has called you because he has plans for you, and he has faith in you being able to do it if you just show up. If you start coming around him. The way we think about ourselves is very important, and God says, let me tell you how you're made. You're made to be loved. You're made to be saved. You're made to be important to people in this world. Do you believe that God knows what he's talking about? And when we believe he knows what he's talking about, do you believe that he can use you? And that's why we have so many wonderful times of God showing how he used different people from different places who would normally be considered a failure until God invited them to partner with him. You start getting self-control by how you think about yourself. And you also have to have self-control and think about others. Jesus died that your enemy could be forgiven and saved. How are you going to think about your enemy? When he says, love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you, when he says, don't reply insult for insult, but with a blessing, he's saying this is self-control because we want something for somebody so that they can actually know what it's like to be loved by somebody who's godly. How do you think about yourself and how you think about them will change how you talk to them and talk about them. Self-control of the mouth comes from self-control, knowing who I am in the arms and plan of God and who you are in the arms and plan of God. Now, with that straight in our mind, we really believe it and we really know it. Now I'm ready to talk in a way that makes an impact on your day and on your life and on your heart. As Paul said in Ephesians, he says, speak words that are helpful for building others up. Don't let corrupt talk come out of your mouth, but only what's helpful for building others up according to their need, that might be blessed. And the words coming out. So to do that, again, we have to go back to make every effort. I've got to practice blessing because we are in a culture that does not practice blessing, but cursing and running down, especially people that are those other people. Whether it's political or economic or racial or whatever, we have a group that's our group and our group's okay. That other group, let me give a list. Let me make a list of jokes about that group. Generationally, millennials and boomers, there's a thing. And then, so what happens is we have another group, we learn to make jokes about the different generations, how they're not like us and they're less than us and all that sort of thing. How does that help us grow closer to them to share the message of Christ? It does not. Back to how we think about them. We think about souls created in the image of God for whom Christ died. Now I'm going to talk about them differently because my Father loves them and my Father loves me. We've got to practice, make every effort to have self-control of our mouth so we say things that will build people up. It's not going to happen if we just go along with our culture, with our friends, with our coworkers, and jump into all the types of jokes that people around us are saying. It's not going to happen if we practice that and we don't practice the blessing. Then when we're angry, a blessing is not coming out of our mouth. Make every effort. You want your mouth to be under control? You got to practice. You got to pray. You got to have a friend. Help me think of a blessing because I can't think of how to bless this person. That's legit because we've practiced curses so much we forget we're supposed to bless. Make every effort in the things that you do. Make every effort that you have control to do things that are helpful, that are a blessing. Because Jesus said, God, let the sun shine on the righteous, the unrighteous, the rain fall on the just and the unjust. Be perfect as he is perfect. The things that we do. But we've got to decide that we're going to make efforts on doing things that bless and things that matter and the things that are spiritually godlike. Because that's why we have this fruit of the Spirit. It's not to be hidden away, but to be shared by God. So, are you ready to be serious? To let God unleash his Holy Spirit in you to bless somebody else. You've got to make that choice, to make that effort. And then when we actually say, God, use me today, and we practice the blessing and we practice the doing with the self-control, all this fruit is how God is presenting us to bless the world through us, because we have been blessed through Christ and his Spirit. The question is, are you ready to let God be serious through you? He's ready. He's given us everything we need. We've just not focused on that. So you want to have self-control? Get your focus right. and then practice. So this morning, if you're like, woo, that's too much, let's pray about it. Or if you look at the times, maybe this last week or month, that you have not practiced self-control in your mind, you've looked at things, you've internalized things that are ungodly, immoral, and sinful, and you've practiced saying things to people and about people, and you need to repent. You need to say, God, I need to be done with that. Or today, you have lived your own life in your own strength, for your own purposes, and you haven't given yourself to Christ and been baptized in His name, saying, here I am, and you're ready to do that this morning, to let yourself be under His control. We can do that. We can baptize. We've had a lot of baptisms this year. It's beautiful. People saying, I'm ready to let God use me. So if you need to do that, or if you need to just ask for prayers to be used more effectively to get rid of some things that you've lost control of, and you need prayers, please come here when we stand and we sing this song.